Welcome to Business of Being Black with Tammi Mack. I am Tammi Mack. Hey, everybody. So American democracy is founded on the principle that policies and leadership are ruled by the people in the form of what else but voting. But if voting continues to be met with roadblocks, who exactly is democracy meant to govern and protect? Lots of debate about the new voting restrictions and if they disproportionately impact and affect Black and brown voters. And with that chaos comes conversation. The business of being Black today is election integrity versus voter suppression. Please welcome author and GOP activist Dr. Linda Lee Tarver is here. Hi, Dr. Tarver.
Hi, and thank you for having me, Tammi.
Social and political commentator Troy Donte Prestwood is here. Hi, Mr. Prestwood.
Hey, Tammi Mack, great to be here.
Activist and radio personality, and my girl, Dominique DePrima. Thank you so much, sis, for holding it down while I was out. I appreciate you so much.
Oh, welcome back, Tammi Mack.
And CEO, Chickasaw Bank, and former Speaker of Oklahoma House, T.W. Shannon, is here with us today. Hi, T.W.
Hi, Tammi. It's a pleasure to be with the one and only Tammi. What an honor.
Troy, why should Black people care?
Yeah, well, for so long, we were denied the right to vote. And so people have literally bled and died for us to gain the right to vote in this country. And so that's why it's important, at least that's why it's important to me. And so I hope that it's also important to Black people across this country. I tell people all the time, the old adage, which is if you're not at the table, then you're on the menu. And I just want to say very quickly, with the last election, we're about to be, election day tomorrow. So a year ago, when we had an election, a presidential election, since that time, there was a really big lie told about the election being stolen. And mostly they were blaming areas where Black people live, urban cities across this country. And so it's so important that we are engaged, especially this year, but every year, whenever there's an election, because if we're not engaged, if we're not at the table, they will slowly but surely chip away at our constitutional right to vote. And we've seen that happen in states across this country. And if we're not careful and if we're not vigilant, we're going to see it happen again.
Yeah. Welcome back to Business of Being Black. I'm Tammi Mack. The business of being Black today is election integrity versus voter suppression. Please welcome author and GOP activist Dr. Linda Lee Tarver, social and political commentator Troy Donte Prestwood, activist and radio personality Dominique DePrima, and CEO Chickasaw Bank and former Speaker of Oklahoma House T.W. Shannon. Troy, let's get right down to this business of being Black when it comes to voting. What are your thoughts on what our panelists have had to say thus far? The integrity only matters when Democrats lose, is what they're saying here.
Yeah, these are Republican talking points, and they're stale. And it's time for some new ones. How about we get some new talking points from Republicans that speak to the fact that we need to protect everyone's right to vote, that we need to make sure that we renew the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. That we renew or pass the For the People Act. That's what we need to hear from Republicans, not these stale talking points about cheating, that Democrats cheat. Let's just start there. But let me just add this other point. When I think about voter ID laws, they are a form of suppression, because what happens is if I am at the poll for an hour waiting to get in, or more, by the way, if I'm waiting to get into the polls to vote, and I get there and suddenly, I forget I don't have an ID on me, I'm turned away. That's a vote that didn't happen. That's
not true. That's not true.
That's suppression. That's a vote that didn't happen. If I can finish my point, I'll let you finish. And so here's the thing. We need to allow for, if I'm there, let me prove myself. You have all the data. I should be able to prove who I am to you so you can give me a ballot. if I don't have, you said TW, you said you don't know anyone in Oklahoma that doesn't have an ID. Well, okay, that's Oklahoma, but there's 49 other states. And so there are people who do not have IDs, older people in particular. And when they get to the polls, well, why are you turning them away? They've been voting in that precinct forever. Why turn them away now? You know, if they can bring a utility bill, if they can bring a phone bill, that should be proof enough for you to be able to prove that who they are, or actually be able to do a signature match. There are ways to still protect the vote, to protect the integrity of voting, but at the same time, ensure everyone has a right to vote. And we expand access and not deny people. That's the craziest thing in the world, that we in a democracy will try to deny people the right to vote.
There was not an insurrection that ever happened on the Democrats.
I was in DC on January 6th. This was not an insurrection. I was in DC on January 6th, proud of it, with other 900,000 people.
Were you part of the insurrection, Dr.
I was in DC on January 6th, had a great time with my president, and I enjoyed it. And I would tell you, if there was an insurrection with 900,000 people or close to 1 million people or more, we would not have had them returning to work a couple hours after this, quote, alleged insurrection.
Well, I don't want to get too much into that, but there were people
alleged
that were
insurrection
the windows of the Capitol, I do believe.
Alleged. They went back to work. They went back to work.
Go ahead.
I was there.
Go jail.
I'm sorry. This is. I don't know where to begin. I mean, Dr. Tarver said there wasn't an alleged insurrection.
It's an alleged insurrection.
I was there. Take an alleged commercial break and come back on the business.
A lot of allegations going on.
Tammi Mack.
It's alleged.
Troy, you said one person's election integrity is another person's voter suppression. Explain that.
Well, because again, I mean, I think you're hearing it right now from TW and from Dr. Tarver here, that they want more election integrity and whatever that means, and all of the pieces of it, which, you know, in my view, make it more difficult to vote. I see that as voter suppression.
I want to go to
why
Troy.
We should protect the vote,
I want to go
particularly
to Troy.
For African Americans.
I want to get a chance to get Troy in before we go to break here. But there were several courts that decided that there was no fraudulent election, and I'm unclear as to why some people don't even believe the courts that were Republican courts. Troy?
Yeah, or Republican appointed judges, right? For whatever the reason, you know, Republicans will not let the big lie go. And you know what? That's fine. Keep it. Okay. It's yours. Give birth to it. I don't care at this point. You know, what we want you to do, if you really believe that one vote, one person, that this is truly what we need to do in our country, then why don't you help us pass? Okay. I'm talking to you, TW. I'm talking to you, Dr. Tarver. Why don't you help us pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Act that stalled in the U.S. Senate? Why don't you help us pass the For the People Act, which is also stalled in the U.S. Senate? Let's get those two votes passed and enacted, and that way we can continue to protect our constitutional right to vote. I'm all for making sure that you are the person that shows up at the polls, but make sure that you also give people what they need in order to vote successfully.
If I may, I appreciate what you're saying. Each state has their own voter laws. Michigan has the most aggressive Black forward voting laws in the nation with respect to IDs and with respect to getting out the vote. Our Secretary of State, Democrat Secretary of State, however, broke the law by not. I'm talking about. I don't disagree with you. I don't disagree with you. I'm telling you.
I think we can go to commercial break on that.
Yes.
Doesn't disagree.
I don't disagree with you.
He doesn't disagree.
I'm telling you that the illegal activity.
Let's take
illegal
a quick break
activity
on this
needs to be
agreement, and we'll come
thwarted.
right back on business of being Black.
I disagree.
We'll be back. Welcome back to Business of Being Black with Tammi Mack. I'm Tammi Mack, and today we're talking about election integrity versus voter suppression. Please welcome author and GOP activist Dr. Linda Lee Tarver.
Hi.
Social and political commentator Troy Donte Prestwood is here, activist and radio personality Dominique DePrima, and CEO Chickasaw Bank and former Speaker Oklahoma House, T.W. Shannon is here. Troy, I want to move to you. Break down the Freedom to Vote Act. You've done a lot of talking about these acts that should be passed, but I think people should know what they represent, why the federal government needs to pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Act and such.
Sure. Well, see, the Supreme Court gutted essentially, it was Section 4 and largely Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act, saying that the pre-clearance formula was outdated. What the John Lewis Voting Rights Act will do is to restore, the pre-clearance. And listen, I think the whole nation needs to come under a stronger level of review when it comes to protecting the constitutional right to vote. The John Lewis Voting Rights Act will do that. The For the People Act really expands voting opportunities. It does go further than maybe Michigan, as Dr. Tarver would talk about. It goes further than Michigan in terms of just ensuring that everyone has access to the polls. I want to be clear, though. We're not talking about those who are not Americans. We're not talking about people who should not have a ballot. We're talking about Americans, all Americans. And what it does was that there's certain levels of protections that are, enacted will protect our right to vote, but also voting integrity. And we saw that based on the last election, that more needs to be done. Listen, I understand that some Republicans don't like the turnout because it did turn out more Democrats than it did Republicans. But listen, when you talk to Republicans, when you talk to Democrats, they all agree that everyone should have stronger access to the polls, regardless of your party, regardless of your region. So I'm just asking, can we get everyone on board with it? At least, we can still battle it out in terms of ideas, right? But
absolutely not.
But at the very minimal, let's at least have a strong and a solid playing ground from which we can battle from.
TW says absolutely not. We can't agree on anything, and we can't get this right.
What we can agree on is that H.R. 1 does anything to expand voting rights. It is a failed Democrat attempt to rebrand this bill, because what it really should be known is the Freedom to Cheat Act. The Freedom to Cheat Act could come up for a vote in the Senate probably this Wednesday.
What are some examples that you have?
Well, I'll give you one.
Dr. Troy, I want to get into this. TW says that a part of the John Lewis Act will allow dead people to vote. I think that's a little disingenuous, and you're stretching it just a little when you say that having no identification allows dead people to vote. So, Troy, can you speak on that? And then Dominique.
It's such a silly argument, Tammy. And rather than me speaking on that, let me just say to an earlier point that he made, which was around that the federal government doesn't have a right to dictate to the states their election laws. There's something called the 15th Amendment. And if it weren't for the 15th Amendment, TW, you and I and our ancestors wouldn't be able to vote. OK, it was that law, that constitutional amendment that dictated to the states that everyone, all of us, people of color, Black people, should in fact have access to the ballot box and that it shouldn't be impeded by the states. So, but this idea of these great things that are in these stalled bills that are currently in the Senate, that it's going to somehow allow dead people to vote. My friend, there was a guy in Pennsylvania, okay, who came back and voted for someone, for a Republican, by the way, who was dead. So this is already happening if you really want to go there. But let me just say, I'm all for making sure that the people who show up at the polls, the people who cast a ballot, are who they say they are. My point here is that we don't want to make it so difficult that it becomes voter suppression. And that's what we're seeing in some of the states, maybe not Michigan, okay, and perhaps maybe in Oklahoma, but maybe not all the other states. But in some states, we're seeing that. And that's why.
Can you give an example? Where is this happening?
Texas.
Oh, goodness. Yes.
That's a great
But,
example. Let's
black
take a
people,
quick
black
break
people
on that
are voting in
Texas,
droves.
and
Texas.
come right back on the business of being black. Tammy
That's it
Mack.
right there, Texas.
Let me move to Troy. I want to make sure he gets a chance to weigh in here. How do we sustain the right to vote, Troy?
Well, you know what? I agree with Dr. Tarver in that we must continue to exercise the right to vote. That's how you sustain it. And we must make sure that that the big lie, which came out at the last election, is squashed. Because what was being done, we have 19 states, mostly led by Republicans, 33 bills in those legislatures that have tightened up the grip on voting. And in some cases, eliminated voting locations or making it difficult. I mean, you can't even, in some cities like Atlanta, for example, in Georgia, this whole idea that you can't pass out water at the polls for those who've been waiting for a long time. We have to fight back against those things. That, my friends, that is voter suppression. And if we're not going to step up and fight against that, then we deserve exactly what's going to come to us. We deserve exactly what Republicans are trying to do by suppressing the vote. So what I'm saying is, if you agree with me, Dr. Tarver, and I don't know about you, TW, but if you agree with me a little bit, then help us make sure that there's equal playing field across the nation, no matter what your background is or your race, your creed.
But Troy,
hold that thought. I want to get to your projects now. Troy, where can we find Talking Heads? It's your new podcast series.
So I'm excited about that. I'm going to be launching it soon. So it's not out yet, but I heard someone mention earlier about Talking Heads. I'm actually launching a podcast called Talking Heads.
Well, we can't wait to see it. Well, thank you all for being on Business of Being Black today, Dr. Tarver. Appreciate your thoughts. Dominique, as always, love you on the show. TW, please come back, and you too, Troy. I appreciate you all and your perspectives on voting suppression and election integrity. And until next time, everybody, I'm Tammi Mack, and that is The Business of Being Black on Fox Soul. Until next time, it's a blessing to be in your box. Bye, y'all.